And thanks everyone for joining today. As Scott said, my name is Randy Pazik, Senior Sales Engineer over here at Source Defense. Topic for today's session, today's webinar is closing the gap on digital skimming and having compliance standards finally catch up. We'll talk about PCI DSS 4.0. For those that are unfamiliar, PCI is the payment card industry. They have released a set of new requirements called DSS 4, Digital Security Standards, for last year, actually. I think it was spring of last year, right around this time last year, they released, and some of those requirements talk specifically about digital skimming, eSkimming. There's a bunch of different kind of names for that. So, you know, there's eSkimming, Magecart, form jacking, click jacking, digital skimming, a lot of names, but ultimately what it is kind of this attack vector that's been around since really 2010, although the first attack happened in 2015. And back in the day, about 7-8 years ago, it was known as Magecart. In 2015, there was a mass executed attack that was discovered within the Magento platform, so Adobe's Magento platform. The attack specifically targeted the shopping cart page of Magento, so hence the name Magecart. Take the first part of Magento, take the last part of shopping cart, combine them, and you get our lovely name brand of Magecart for this type of attack. And when I say this type of attack, what I mean is that these attacks are using JavaScript to execute malicious behavior or call in additional scripts to compromise the page that a visitor is viewing on your site. Some of the more famous attacks, Magecart style attacks, include brands like Macy's, Best Buy, Ticketmaster, British Airways, among others. So we'll talk about the rise of Magecart, right? Hundreds of attacks every week, alerts issued by FBI, the Visa, and PCI, and then most recently PCI updating their standards. So Source Defense, as a company in the client-side security and Magecart prevention space, we try to stay up to date on these Magecart attacks. So, like I said, there's hundreds of attacks every week. We personally have a Slack channel where we post any type of Magecart attack we find. We put it in our Slack channel for our research teams to investigate. Our research teams have posted their own that they found just by doing scans of the web. So we try to stay up to date on these as best we can. From 2016 to 2018, there were over 2 million attacks carried out by various Magecart groups. So Magecart groups, at one point, there were around 13 different groups carrying out these attacks. Since then, it's gone down, depending on the security institute you pay attention to. That's either gone down to 7 or 8, or it stays around 13 or like 11 or 12. But ultimately, these groups were kind of created, these groups organically came about because there were no standards for web development or e-commerce to adhere to. There were businesses that were being caught off guard by this attack. There were businesses that were unaware that this was even an issue. Or there were businesses that were using what I'll call cobbled together solutions that may or may not have been intended to detect or prevent a JavaScript-based attack. And the inconvenient truth of this is that this isn't a problem that's going away. As businesses saw kind of e-commerce growth during the pandemic and subsequent lockdowns, attacks have gone up, culminating in a report by Visa of a 175% increase in attacks in the past 6 months alone. Visa's most recent payment fraud report from December calls out the targeting of e-commerce platforms and specifically third-party code integrations therein as some of the most common tactics to carry out these digital skimming attacks. And there's also a report from Recorded Future, which calls out the number of infected domains at the end of 2022 being close to 2,500. Infected domains being domains that may have a Magecart infection or digital skimming infection on their site that has not yet been remediated or removed or wasn't prevented in any fashion. So let's look at how this attack starts. So digital skimming starts with JavaScript. And some of you may say, Randy, digital skimming starts with a D and an S. And yes, you're right, but the attack digital skimming starts with JavaScript. And JavaScript is contained inside the HTML of a site. And it's delivered to a web browser within what's called a document object model, or DOM. DOM is kind of the skeleton that makes up the site. All the elements, all of the style sheets, everything that makes up the site is contained within that DOM. And the unfortunate truth about JavaScript is that when it was created, and that was in the mid-90s actually, when JavaScript was created, there was no inclusion of access control or permissioning. Kind of JavaScript has free reign to do what it wants on a page. And this means that it can access and control any element contained within that DOM. So if we were to build out a web page here, just with some HTML tags, a good Samaritan or programmer that will use JavaScript will use this JavaScript access for good, and good is in air quotes there, because some of the benefits of some of these scripts is debatable. But a typical programmer will use the access JavaScript has to benefit the company, the business, including the JavaScript, or the visitor in some fashion. So, for example, reading fields on a page can be used to validate entries, such as names or phone numbers or email addresses or billing addresses. There's modifying or adding to the page dynamically based on my profile, my profile on a site. So if you've ever been to like an e-commerce site that says, oh, you're looking at shoes, well, you may also like these other items. That's an example of dynamically generated JavaScript or dynamically generated content based on JavaScript. But these same actions can also be used maliciously by less than nice developers, such as reading fields like a name or payment card, changing fields from an address to a payment card information, to fish for data that wasn't originally asked for, or even adding fields or elements to a page in order to gather additional pieces of information. So reading, modifying, and adding, when used for good, can benefit business and can benefit a site visitor. Reading, modifying, and adding to a page can be used maliciously when we talk about JavaScript and maliciously motivated attackers or activists that want to somehow disrupt a site or disrupt a visitor's experience therein. So where are the gaps in what we'll say is traditional website security or traditional web app security, and where are the holes that we find with client-side security? I'll talk first about PCI DSS 4.0. These are gaps specifically that are being required now to be filled by PCI come a couple of years, although you'll be I think you'll be audited on them, if not already, certainly next year. So PCI DSS 4, specific requirements around 643 and 1161, for those of you into numbers and sections. All payment page scripts that are running on pages where credit cards are taken must be authorized to run on that page. There must be a way to assure the integrity of those scripts to make sure the behavior stays in a beneficial or positive behavior. An inventory of all of those scripts must be maintained. You must also have written justification as to why each script is necessary on that payment page. And payment page headers must be monitored for changes, unauthorized changes, and that monitoring must happen at least once every 7 days. So those are some of the gaps that PCI has called out. So let's look at some traditional client-side security and see what these can do to combat these attacks. So here is a list of all existing, we'll say traditional client-side security solutions in all their glory, right on screen right now. And that's not exactly true. There are actually some. It is not just going to stay a blank page there, but that's not just for comedic effect. The solutions that I show here, which are the ones that we come across at Source Defense most often, are not true digital skimming solutions. So we'll kind of start left to right, as is kind of the standard. So we'll start with WAF, or Web Application Firewall. WAFs are used to protect your web app from attacks, such as denial of service attacks, bot attacks, application requests, malicious application requests. The biggest piece there to understand is that the browser, or the client side of a website, is not protected by a WAF in any manner. In PCI DSS 4.0, the requirement to have digital skimming protections is separated from that of WAF because the functional differences between the two do not overlap. A WAF stops at the browser, and your client-side security pieces need to pick up at the browser level. So the next solution that comes to mind is something called SRI, or Sub-Resource Integrity. This is where we get into the two native browser technologies, so SRI and CSP. SRI is traditionally used to verify content from a CDN. So the use of CDNs allows quick and responsive website experiences, but an attacker can inject arbitrary malicious content into CDN files in order to compromise a site in some fashion. And if we look at the Mozilla dev pages, which is a great resource for things like this, they specifically suggest using SRI because, quote, SRI enables you to mitigate some risks of attacks such as this by ensuring that the files your web application or web document fetches from a CDN or anywhere have been delivered without a third party having injected any additional content into those files, and without any other changes of any kind at all having been made to those files, end quote. So SRI can technically be used to control the execution of non-CDN fetched JavaScript. But SRI requires the creation of cryptographic hashes for every script and every time a script changes, whether that's a controlled or internally developed script or a third party, one that is dynamically generated or not controlled by your organization. This means that the administrative burden for SRI is very, very high. It is important to note, though, that part of PCI DSS 4 and 6.4.3 does state that SRI can be used to protect payment pages from these attacks. And we do agree, Source Defense does agree, that this is a valid solution to control static scripts. But it is typically difficult to execute for dynamic scripts or scripts that are not controlled by your organization, and even organizationally controlled scripts can be difficult. So, as the saying goes, it's easier said than done with SRI. So the final piece on this page here is CSP, or Content Security Policy. And I'll refer again to the Mozilla dev pages, which states why CSP is typically used. Quote, content security policy is an added layer of security that helps to detect and mitigate certain types of attacks, including cross-site scripting and data injection, end quote. Cross-site scripting attacks typically use an in-URL call to an outside source of JavaScript in order to perform theft or defacement or malware distribution. And data injection attacks will use data contained within a site URL in an attempt to manipulate the site in some fashion. This may include remote code execution, malicious script injection, anything else. We think at Source Defense, we think CSP is a valid solution for cross-site scripting attacks, as the setup of whitelists or whitelisting scripts allows security teams to limit where JavaScript can load from. However, and this may be one of the downfalls, most skimming attacks piggyback on JavaScript that is already included on a website. And if CSP is present, that piggybacking can allow those scripts to create their own iframe and manipulate the page to escape the, we'll call it a CSP cage, created by your CSP policy. So as is the case with SRI, however, PCI DSS 4 does call out CSP as a valid solution to meet their eSkimming requirements. And I don't want to harp too much on these kind of traditional solutions, but I think it's important, again, to understand those gaps, specifically one we haven't talked about with SRI, in that we maybe shouldn't put all of our eggs into a single or one kind of traditional client-side security basket. So the biggest gap with SRI is that if a script is not hashed, it is allowed to run on the page. Meaning if you fall behind or forget to hash a script, it will be allowed to run on the page. And in the case of cross-site scripting attacks, SRI will not block or prevent them. The burden for teams to create hashes every time a script changes means SRI is really only viable, as I said before, for internally developed JavaScript, making the choice to use only SRI a gap-filled smile, I guess is what I would describe it as. And I just mentioned it with CSP. It's more related to client security than SRI, but again, whitelisting those scripts does allow a script to run, does not check for content of that script, meaning any compromised or malicious code inserted into that already whitelisted script will not be prevented by CSP. No solution is perfect, and the gap in the use of CSP can easily and is easily exploited by attackers. One of the things I may encourage you to do is open up Google or your search engine of choice and just type in the words CSP bypass. And there's a lot of websites that will show how to get around CSP, how to look for improperly configured CSP headers so that you can get around. It is, again, very good for cross-site scripting when configured correctly, but can still allow skimming attacks to happen even if configured correctly. So that brings me to source defense, the gap filler. Sorry, I got a little marketing heavy there, but let's talk about source defense, what we do, why we might be a good alternative or a good addition to SRI or CSP that you may be using already. So source defense, we created in 2015 now, I think, a purpose-built patented solution to tackle kind of the source of these digital skimming or e-skimming attacks. So rather than using whitelists or proxies or cryptographic hashes, that's a fun word to say, cryptographic hashes, we use behavioral analysis. And I say that because the one commonality that all e-skimming scripts have, regardless of their source or their Magecart group they originated from, is that they need to read or skim data from input fields. In our solution, we call it Source Defense Protect, prevents that behavior in real time. And the reading or skimming of data doesn't just happen within the input fields. It also can be key logging. So it can be a key up or key down event that the script is listening for. So we would be preventing that behavior. So the gaps we're looking to fill in client-side security or in PCI DSS 4 is true control over scripts running on payment pages, HTTP header monitoring, justifying scripts, and maintaining an up-to-date script inventory. So let's talk about how Source Defense Protect, which is one of our products, helps to fill those gaps. So first thing we do is we are deployed as 2 lines of code in a website. Very easy, we provide you with 2 lines of code. You put our code at the top of the HTML of your site. And for every visitor that visits your page thereafter, we instruct that visitor's browser to create what we call virtual pages. Those virtual pages will force all third-party JavaScript running on your site to execute within those virtual pages. And within there is kind of our secret sauce where we can control the access those pieces of JavaScript have to the page. So if a script needs to know that I'm clicking on a link or that I'm viewing a page about blue sneakers, it can know that. If it needs to know, let's say, what my name is or what my email is, should you choose to allow that, we can allow that. However, any attempt for a script to read a payment card field or fields that may be protected under other regulations like HIPAA or GDPR or CCPA, those fields are blocked by default for any script running on the page, meaning it cannot access that input element and does not know when a visitor is interacting with that element in any way. So effectively, we are isolating scripts from a web page. We are preventing unwanted behavior, preventing attacks or malicious actions in real time. Source Defense Protect has a dashboard with an inventory and justification spaces for scripts that are running on your page. And because we're running on every visit, we can look at HTTP headers and script behavior and frequency that makes sense for your business. So I do want to show the dashboard. So I am going to pause my share real quick so I can get logged in, and then we'll take a quick walk around this Source Defense dashboard and then come back for questions and answers. So as I'm going through, just make sure we have some questions ready for me. I do like a little bit of improv, so hopefully we have some good questions that I can answer for everyone. And while I'm doing this, I should let everyone know this is a dashboard that we've had in development now. We kind of had I guess you'd call it a soft opening with it in it was September, October of last year. So it's a data focused kind of new dashboard for us that shows a lot of pieces of information in a very kind of easily digestible manner. And so we've taken some feedback from some existing customers, we've taken feedback from some of our partners, and have developed this very data-rich, data-forward dashboard, and included some pieces specifically for PCI and their DSS 4.0 requirements. So I'm looking right now at the Source Defense dashboard. This is for the sourcedefense.com site, so you can kind of see everything that's going on here. This is a time period of the last 30 days. And on here, I can see everything from events, which is a collection of script behavior and signals that we observe scripts partaking in, all the way over to payment page header monitoring, which we do not have payment pages on sourcedefense.com, but as a way to show that we can monitor them, we are monitoring our own page headers on every page of our site. So we can take a look at that. But this is kind of your main dashboard. So again, right, open events, which are a collection of signals and behaviors, payment page headers, a request map of where your scripts are actually loading from, what their origin is, as well as scripts that are performing the most high danger events on your page. Is it data exposure, PII exposure? If scripts are accessing payment data or sending data to a blacklisted domain or attempting to send data to a blacklisted domain, accessing a camera or microphone on things like mobile devices, we observe all of that behavior and report on it. So I mentioned payment page headers. I'll go ahead and click on the view details piece here. PCI DSS 4 does state that we need to monitor for changes on payment page headers, and here is kind of that dashboard piece within the Source Defense platform. So I can see here things like a connection. We're choosing to, the new header value is to keep that alive. So we've found changes here. The nice part about this section of this module is that I can choose to always ignore things like the date changing. That would make sense. But I can choose to report on other changes every time I see it. I can choose to ignore it once, or I can choose to set the new value as the baseline. Therefore contrasting that with any future scan we do for header values. And if a change is made again, we would be reporting on that change. This data is also exportable into a CSV, so you can very easily hand it to someone like your PCI QSA that may be performing an audit or an assessment on your site. You can export this data out should you choose to. I'll go back very quickly here and I'll click on actually scripts over on the left-hand side. So scripts is an up-to-date, consistently up-to-date list of all scripts running on your page. Let's change this. So I can see here all of these scripts running on sourcedefense.com. I can see information on whether they're a third party or fourth party, their category. I can see how popular they are. That's very useful should you be using maybe a less than common script. You'd be able to see that and then make what we would say informed decisions on whether you want to continue to use that company, maybe until they get more market share, until they become more common, or if you're okay with the risk of using something that is typically not seen on sites, we have that report for you. And actually, if I click into something like, let's go into like our fourth party attack demonstration that we have here. If you choose to deploy this on multiple domains, you'd have a list of the domains where this script appears. For us, it appears on sourcedefense.com. And I'm able to see here information on the script. I can see when it was first detected and last detected. I can see the justification, which would be your PCI justification as to why this script is running on a page. I can see that it's running in an isolated policy. And if there were any events that we needed to be concerned about, I'd be able to see those as well. So let me go back and choose, let's see, we'll choose something like maybe drift. Yeah, here we go. So there's information about drift here. I know that it's in a policy. I know when it was first and last detected. I can add script justification here. I can see that we are monitoring this script. And I can see that the events for the script are not very risky. They are what we would call informational events, such as the script is using first-party cookies and using browser storage. All things we would expect for something like Drift to be using or something like any third party to be using. I can choose to review this event, thereby removing it from the main dashboard and removing it from any prompts that I have to review events in the future. And if there were any other pieces of information here, if it was, and I'll actually expand, if it was doing more than just reading and writing first-party cookies, if it was trying to access input fields or it was trying to send data out, I'd be able to see that information here as well. If it appears in any type of blacklist, I can see that over in the upper right, how many sessions are exposed to this, as well as if I scroll down any concerning domain information, such as the domain expiring or SSL certificate information, such as the SSL expiring, thereby maybe not encrypting the data that may be moving back and forth through this script. So that's a look at the script, the kind of the main page for that, where we can add our script justification. We've looked at kind of that script inventory. We've looked at the payment page headers. And I should say that everything you see here, minus what we just looked at, which was the policies. Let me go back to that there. So minus the policy piece, everything else you see here is available with our Source Defense Detect product. Source Defense Protect adds the policy pieces, those virtual pages where scripts are executed within. With that, we'll pause here for any questions. We are, it looks like, ahead of schedule, which is good. So any questions that may come about from what we just saw, or questions maybe I haven't touched on, topics I haven't touched on, please ask those now using the Q&A panel or chat panel in the GoToWebinar window. Okay. There is a question, can Source Defense act as the inventory and allow us to log track business justifications for scripts? Yes, the dashboard holds the inventory and any justification that you add into that script main page within the dashboard is logged with the user and with the date that that justification was entered. It's also part of our audit logs, so you can actually pull that up using the audits feature within the dashboard as well, should you need to pull that information for any reason. And just wait for some others to come in. There's a good question. It just kind of validates the inventory and justification piece within there. There's some confusion internally about when we'll need to address PCI 4.0 requirements. Assessment under the new version begins in March. Yes, so some QSAs are assessing your readiness for PCI DSS 4.0 for some of those requirements now, although really they're supposed to be starting in March of 2024. Does this mean we have to have these controls in place then? So I would suggest yes. Assessments start in less than a year now, so you will have to fill those gaps, remediate against that assessment. And this isn't an attack that is going to start happening in 2025 when the requirements go into place. This is an attack that is happening now. And we think it can be a very easy problem to fix or an easy gap to fill. I mentioned it before, at least with source defense, it's 2 lines of code in the head of the HTML, and our system kind of takes over from there. So it makes sense to just kind of fill the gaps, put a check in the box now, and then not worry come assessment time or even come requirement time that this is a gap you will have to fill. Does source defense have established relationships with healthcare entities for PCI compliance? Yeah, so we do have a healthcare industry company within our roster. I'm not going to give out their name, but we do. And I would say, the need for this type of solution, even going beyond PCI, when you talk about HIPAA, or you talk about, I believe recently in the news there was a meta tag issue where Meta or Facebook was actually reading HIPAA protected data on a healthcare site and suggesting to the visitor in later browser sessions on other sites that they take a specific medicine or they talk to a specific doctor about their problem when they hadn't really informed anyone else of that or posted it publicly. There was a lawsuit against Meta with that. So this isn't for healthcare. I would say this isn't just about PCI. This is also takes into account kind of HIPAA or any other protected health or PII or PHI style data. So thank you. Does source events have PCI attestation of compliance, which they can provide as a service provider? We are working with one of our vendors on getting a PCI AOC at some point before 2025. We want to see if there's any amendments that are going to be made to the requirements, and then just make sure that we have everything kind of buttoned up. I mentioned that this dashboard, the dashboard piece specifically, is about 6 months old, and we've taken some direction into filling some of the PCI pieces there. But AOC is on our roadmap for something that we will be looking into in the future. How quickly can this be deployed? I mean, that's a loaded question, but I guess it depends on kind of the agility of your teams internally to adjust the website code. We've deployed in hours. We've also worked with companies to deploy over hundreds of sites, hundreds of domains that they own over the course of a few months. So really it depends on kind of your internal process. We provide 2 lines of code. We have a meeting with our deployment team. They provide you with the 2 lines of code. They let you know where in the site it should go. We then verify the placement and send over policies for scripts that are then applied to any script on the page, and then that code can be deployed to production. So like I said, that's been in a couple hours, or we work with companies that have done hundreds of sites and just done it timely over a couple months. So I would say, for hitting the major security and compliance problems that are out there, we're probably the easiest you'll have to deploy because of those policies. And I didn't mention at the time, but we do look at your scripts ahead of time. We do have a database of JavaScript out there, and we have policies that meet those scripts. So at the time of deployment, those policies are applied almost instantaneously. And should you decide to add a new script, that new script is detected immediately upon adding it to the page, and a policy is either pulled down from our database or is generated for you within a matter of hours. So again, it's a very kind of easy, once you have the policy in place, it's a very set it and forget it solution. And those policies can actually be applied automatically should you choose to do so. We're getting a lot of great questions. I'm doing a lot of talking, which is good. The requirement to check for HTTP header integrity, is that weekly? Yeah, the PCI DSS 4 does state in, I think it's 11.6.1, does state that you need to monitor for changes on headers at least once every 7 days. So yeah, weekly. Although that can be done more frequently should you choose to. Can you give a little bit more background on how long you've been doing this work at Source Defense? Personally, personally, I've been here since December of 2019. But Source Defense itself, we went to market in 2017. So we've been doing this now for 7 years and sorry, 6 years. My math is wrong. 6 years. So, we kind of went to market with a solution once we were confident that we were able to protect in the way that we wanted to. We went to market with the only real-time prevention solution, right? We've talked about SRI and CSP, and there's some other like JavaScript proxying solutions and everything, but all those are reactive. So we were the first one and only one still with a real-time preventative solution for this problem. And as far as, what's the other part of that? As far as the types of sites we protect, I think it's something like $20 billion in transactions every single year. Billions of site visits, anything from healthcare to e-commerce, retail, financial services, hospitality, entertainment businesses. So realistically for us, when we look at a site, we look at what information is being collected or transacted across the site, what scripts are running on there, and is there a case for us to be protecting that information, right? We have some companies that are using us for gift card entries. So think about like going to a website and you want to see how much is on your gift card. You type in your gift card number, you type in the PIN. Typically, that is not tied to a name. It's typically not tied to a zip code. It's typically not, inside authentication. I don't have to log in to check my gift card value. But if you think about a skimmer sitting on a gift card page, it's going to steal that data. And now as an attacker, I'm going to have a database, let's say, of gift cards for a specific restaurant or a specific retail shop that I can use now myself. And there's no way to know that it's been stolen simply because there's nothing else attached to it. It's just a card number and a PIN. So we have some customers that are using us for that because they want to take care. There's a duty of care for their customers. They want to take care of them. And I think there's one more here. Let me just read this real quick. Okay. If I'm not ready to commit to filling my PCI gaps with Source Defense, number one, why? No, I'm just playing. But I wanted to see what is happening on my site. What can I do, or do you offer a solution other than your PCI solution? Yeah, I mentioned it very briefly when I was discussing the dashboard. Source Defense Protect, which is what we've been talking about, that uses the virtual pages and isolation of scripts, is kind of our full suite of product. That is kind of our gold standard. But we do offer something for companies that may not want to go that route right away, and we call it Source Defense Detect. Source Defense Detect offers everything but the prevention piece that Protect offers. So you get the dashboard access, you get script behavior, you get events, you get signals on those scripts. You get the PCI pieces like HTTP header monitoring, inventory, and justification spaces. You simply don't have the ability with Detect to prevent anything. So it's a typical kind of detect and respond, or scan and remediate type solution. And that is because of that is more has a lower cost of entry, and can always be upgraded to Source Defense Protect should you want to gain visibility now and gain some of those PCI pieces now, and then come time to fully prevent or fully control those scripts, you can move to Source Defense Protect. So there's a couple ways there, and I should say Source Defense Detect, the scan solution, does not require any code deployment. So it can actually be stood up in typically less than a day, but we can typically stand that up pretty quickly for you should you want to go with that. And I don't think we have any other questions. I'm going to take another sip. We'll see if one more comes in. Or two more, whatever. All right, it looks like that's probably it on the question side. Very good questions today. Let me talk for a little bit longer, which was good. So with that, I'll say if you want to get a personal kind of one-on-one demonstration for myself on your site or one of my colleagues, please go to sourcedefense.com/request-a-demo. You can fill out the form there and get a personalized demonstration for your site that shows an attack and shows the prevention of an attack, should you want to see that. And we're also offering, if you engage with us on our site, we're also offering a free free trial of what we call our risk dashboard, which is what we looked at today, just with some of the features stripped out. That's free. You can have information up to date, your website risk information up to date on your risk dashboard, and accompanying that is a risk report that gives you a letter grade, your top high risk events, as well as your scripts that you're running, and what those events mean for remediation, both with and without Source Defense. So please reach out to us, sourcedefense.com, for a ton of resources and information, sourcedefense.com/request-a-demo should you want to see kind of a personalized demonstration of what we looked at today. I thank everyone for attending. I know this is RSA week, so thanks for kind of taking a break if you're out there at RSA to listen to me speak for 45 minutes. Again, my name is Randy Pazik, Senior Sales Engineer over here at Source Defense. My email is there should you want to reach out, have any questions that come up after the fact. But again, thanks so much, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their day.